Aloha Manga Club. Some of you asked for it. Some of you voted on it. And some of you threatened me to get this list. That is right, it is officially time for the Aloha Top 10 Shonen and Seinen series that I think every manga collector should own, or at least try to own. Now, when I was making this list, it took me hours, if not days, of dedication and deliberation to get it down to these 11, sorry, manga. I had to go through my nearly 200 series that I've read, the 60 that I own, and pare it down to what I think is culturally significant, what I think is fun to read, and what I think could open up a little bit of a different world for you overall. So the biggest requirement that I had was I needed to remain impartial. And to do that, I actually looked at about 10 separate top 100 manga of all time lists, and picked some from there. Then I picked some from my personals and erased them all and said, screw that, I'm going to be completely not impartial and choose what I actually think is the best. So what better way to kick off the list than what is considered one of the greatest and most influential manga of all time, and that is Akira. Now, Akira was written in the 1980s and is an absolutely massive document. Like, seriously, this thing is the size of my head. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Lohali, why would you recommend this? This is a classic. Everyone knows it. Well, yeah, that's exactly why I'm recommending it. This helped open up manga and anime to the mainstream American audience in the 80s. If it wasn't for Akira, I highly, highly doubt that Dragon Ball would have been half as successful as it is right now in the Americas. That's right, Akira, the story about post-World War III nuclear apocalypse Tokyo, brought in manga to the world. Now, the artwork and the story are pretty interesting for the 80s, but for me, it's just the fact this is such a culturally significant item that I think you would be at a loss to at least not try to read it, enjoy it, and understand why it has this effect. Number 2 on my list is a sports manga, and for those of you that know me, no, unfortunately, it is not Hajime no Ippo. I ended up choosing Eyeshield 21. Now, Eyeshield 21 is the story about American football players in Japan, and they are in high school. Now, I could have chosen Real by Takui Inoue, or I could have chosen Slam Dunk by Takui. Man, that man really, really enjoys basketball. The reason why I did not choose Slam Dunk or Real is, one, I have not read Real before, so I cannot put it on the list in good conscience. And number 2, I think that, again, this is a personal opinion coming in, Eyeshield 21 for me is a little bit more memorable than Slam Dunk. Like, I will go back and reread Eyeshield 21 over and over and over and over again, whereas Slam Dunk, I've read it once or twice, and it has stuck with me, and I do believe it's an amazing manga, but I don't think that, again, personally, you're going to get quite as much enjoyment out of it. The other reason why I chose Eyeshield 21 is I honestly believe that there are 2 juggernauts who helped create the series. There's Itagaki, the author, who is currently behind Dr. Stone, a super, super popular shonen manga. And then there is Murata, who is the illustrator and is currently behind one of the most beautifully drawn shonen that is in publication, and that is One Punch Man. Now, both these men combined to make this 37 Takuban series something absolutely amazing. Like, I cry almost every time that I read it, and I forget what happens. If you've never heard me talk about Eyeshield 21, check up there or check down in the description, because that video was so much fun to make. Now, next, at number 3, is a modern classic. Now, I'm not going to define what a modern classic is, because my buddy Amasio J does a great job, but we have Full Metal Alchemist. Now, this series is 27 Takubans of pure philosophical craziness. People ask themselves, what is God? Who is God? Who am I? What are you? What is a Philosopher's Stone? There are so many questions asked in this series that it's insane. But why is it so important? Why do I believe that you should own it? Well, first of all, it has had one of the most well-received anime of all time. In fact, it has 2 of the most well-received anime of all time. It has Full Metal Alchemist, which branches off into its own little thing, and then Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is a series that I finally got Sydney to watch, and she nearly beat me up for, because I didn't tell her a major spoiler. This series is so beautifully drawn, so well written, and asks so many great questions that I think it would be a disservice to you as a collector to not at least pick up the first volume, flip through, and realize that this is a cultural phenomenon. And if it is not a classic at this moment in time, within the next 5 to 10 years, it will become a classic. It has so much cultural significance. It has so many quotable ideas, so many interesting characters that you get pulled into the story, and it's something really unique that brought me deeper and deeper into manga when I was about 12 or 13. Now, number 4 is something that is a little bit different than what I would normally tell you about. In fact, you've heard me mention it before, and I ended up getting a few volumes on my last manga haul, and that is Ranma 1/2. Ranma half. Again, I'm still not sure how to say this. Rumiko Takahashi is also behind Inuyasha, another culturally significant manga and anime, but I believe Ranma 1/2 is just a little bit better. For me, this is a great blend of comedy. It's great action, and it has pretty decent romance, at least an interesting romance subplot. This is a way for you as a collector to start to branch out what you're trying to read. Instead of just reading pure battle, action, and gore, throwing in a nice comedy, throwing in a nice romance-style manga is a great way to go about things. And it doesn't help that this is legitimately a classic. It is 38 volumes long, it is interestingly drawn, and it makes me laugh every single time that I reread the series. Now, there are 38 volumes, so it is a little bit of a heftier purchase, but they're beautiful. I highly recommend it, and if you don't, I'm watching you. Next, I don't actually have a Takuban for because this is one of my white whales. If you paid attention to the last Loha Lee and Jean Graves manga club, you know that Pluto is what I am talking about. That is right. The author behind Monster, Naoki Urasawa, created this amazing amalgamation series called Pluto. Now, why do I call it an amalgamation? Because for me, it is a reimagining of Astro Boy. In fact, that is what it was created to be. And as the first seinen series, in my opinion, on this list, Akira doesn't really count, it's bordering it, but as a beautiful seinen series that was inspired by the classic manga, Pluto is a great way to jump in. It is by one of my favorite authors, and if I do say so myself, I think that this is the perfect way to get into Urasawa because it is not quite as hefty of a read. There aren't quite as many volumes, there aren't twists and turns. It's just a solid mystery thriller, and I cannot recommend it enough. So that is our top 5. Now we move on to number 6. The man behind the 6th series in this list is currently writing Hiatus. You know him. You kind of get mad at him sometimes, but if you weren't expecting Yu Hakusho, the quintessential 90s manga to appear on this list, you're crazy. This series is such a fun read. It introduces so many fun concepts and honestly has one of the best tournament arcs in all of manga. The Dark Tournament, seriously, it's crazy. Now, what this series does amazingly well is it captures the idea and the struggle of somebody who has lost their way in life, finally discovering the path and transforming into who they really want to become. That is the story of Yusuke Urameshi. He starts off as a delinquent who's just getting into brawls, getting into fights, and really just leading a listless life to becoming a hero with a purpose, becoming a person who isn't just fighting to fight. He is fighting because he has something to protect. And that is an amazing thing to have on your shelves. Again, I also think that Tagashi writes brilliant series, and this is a great way at 19 volumes to get into his works. Because after that, you get into Hunter x Hunter, and we're sitting in like the 30s or 40 volumes. Just pick up Yu Hakusho. I cannot say enough great things about it. Now, at number 7 on this list is probably the very first horror-style manga that I have ever read in my life. It is bloody, it is violent, it had a brand new anime this year, and it is, for all intents and purposes, a classic. And that is Parasite. Now, Parasite covers a story of a young man who gets this weird alien demon thing in his right arm, I believe, named Miggy, and they go on wacky, zany, violent, murdery adventures throughout the land of Japan. Now, I think that as culturally significant as this one could be, I'm about to say something that's probably controversial. I think it's underrated. Now, as overrated as some of you may think this is, this series was so influential, it literally took 25-ish, maybe 30 years to get an anime adaptation. That's a ridiculously long amount of time. And it was a very, very well done anime adaptation at that. There are some things about this series that you just can't capture. It doesn't quite have Uzumaki's terrifying idea behind it, but it has some body horror. And it does try to give you an environmental message, but ignore that. Who cares about the environment? Nobody cares about the environment. Now, these last four do kind of hinge on personal opinion, with number 9 probably being the most controversial thing I've ever put on a list. So let's go with number 8, the one that I think is my most influential manga, and that is Dragon Ball. Not Dragon Ball Z, not Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball Kai, just the good old quintessential adventure action manga that was created by Akira Toriyama. Now, this is another one of my white whales, at least in this Takuban form, but this follows the adventures of Son Goku, and it actually does mirror a lot of Journey to the West from China. This series is all about finding these 7 Dragon Balls and saving the world all at the same time. Why would I recommend this over Dragon Ball Z? You might think I'm crazy. You might think I'm insane. But just the innocent comedy behind a lot of it, and the fact that we get to see Goku grow and mature as an individual, is something that I don't think can be replaced. And I don't think Dragon Ball Z is quite as good as Dragon Ball in that aspect. While the fights may be grander in Dragon Ball Z, the adventure is so much better in Dragon Ball. Now, number 9 is the single most controversial thing that I have ever put on a list. Some of you are going to be surprised, so I want you to sit down and wait for it. Are you ready? I think that every collector should at least try to own and read Death Note. That's right. My most disappointing and disliked series is something that I'm recommending for a collector to have. Now, you might be asking yourself, Lohali, why would you do that? Why would you put this on a list? Simple. Very, very, very simple. I think that the first half of this manga is honestly not bad at all. And to really, really, really understand this idea of modern shonen, I think that reading Death Note and understanding where it comes from and what it has influenced is infinitely more important than anything that really has been on this list. You know, this gives you a good idea of how a manga can start out really, really good and end really terribly. It was culturally significant in the fact that it had one of the most critically acclaimed anime of all time. It's had a terrible Netflix live-action movie that's going to get a second one just because it has the name Death Note. Seriously, if you think that this series is terrible, if you think that this series is overrated, and if you think that, well, it could be done better, then you just need to understand that people out there are going to like it regardless of what you think, and you need to recommend it and give people a chance to form their own opinions, which is what I'm doing. So, collect Death Note at your own risk. Now, the last 2 on this list, so 10 and 11, kind of go hand in hand. I wanted to give you something to continue collecting, something that you can't buy all of them at once because it's an ongoing series. And I chose 2 of the most popular shonen manga to date. One is basically the highest selling manga of all time, and that is One Piece. We are currently sitting at 92 Takubans, so it is a hefty, hefty investment for those of you that do not understand what a pirate exploring the ocean is all about. You should get it. And finally, you have My Hero Academia. The beauty of this series is it is short, it is really, really well done, and it takes the shonen hero trope and perfects it, I actually want to say. It does such an amazing job of creating likable characters, making you want to understand who and what is really, really behind the driving motivations of a character. It has a great anime. It has a great movie that I saw in theaters, luckily, and it blew me away when I finally decided to pick it up and start reading it because I was stubborn. Now, to give you a little bit of a breakdown, if you chose everything including One Piece, there are 266 volumes for you to add to your shelves. If you chose everything and chose the My Hero Academia path instead, there are 196 takubans that you need to place behind you. Now, this gives you a good goal to go with, and I think that if you get any of these 10 series, you will not be disappointed. You know, with Akira being as culturally relevant as it is, Ice Shield 21 just being some good, heartwarming fun, Full Metal Alchemist asking the important philosophical questions, Ranma really kind of bringing you an interesting look at romance and comedy, Pluto reinventing Astro Boy and introducing to you my boy, Urasawa, Yu Hakusho being that 90s nostalgia factor, Parasite being that first introduction into horror, Dragon Ball, the ultimate adventure manga, Death Note, the dark horse in this competition, and finally One Piece and My Hero Academia as the continuing series that I believe are worthy to add to any collection. Do you own any of these? Let me know in the comments down below. For everyone new and old, welcome and welcome back. As always, it's your boy Lohili. I'll see you next video.